Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We just always give a couple minutes at the beginning for people to join, so just stick with us here, and in 120 seconds or so, we'll get going. Thank you. All right, I think it's time we dive into it. So thank you, everyone, for joining. This is Mastering System Patching, Secure and Streamline Your Multi-Platform Devices. What does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about our platform, Bacon, and we are going to talk about how it does patching. We'll give a little overview at the beginning just for people to get caught up who haven't seen the platform before, but we will mostly spend time today showing some really interesting different ways that you can get patching done. It can always be a challenge. So we'll also talk a little bit about 4.2, which is a new version that's just out and just starting to get deployed out to clients, and the coming versions 4.5, which has a lot of new interesting things in it. So we'll do the high level overview, then talk a little bit about what's happening with real customers in the real world, go over new features, and then we'll wrap it up. And in there, my overview will be short and sweet, I hope, and then Dave will do the demo. And with that, why don't we do some introductions? My name is John Marcato. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders at Bacon. And joining me today is Dave Adekoya, who's one of our senior engineers and certainly the best presenter. So I always like it when he comes and does the heavy lifting. So thanks for joining me today, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, why don't we get into some of the housekeeping really quick, and then I'll do my overview. Basically, we've got a couple things here that we just want to make sure we mention. One, we do a survey at the end. We do give away super comfortable soft t-shirts that are very cool and will make you look super cool with all your friends. So please do stick around. We really appreciate the feedback. It's super helpful to make our webinars better and better and our product better and better. So thank you in advance for that. Also, please do participate in the polls, and also feel free to ask questions if you haven't used GoToWebinar before. There's a real simple section in the little sidebar there called questions, and you can type in there, and we have people sitting around to answer questions. So they'll be lonely if you don't ask any, so please do. With that said, we also have some informational things. You can see testimonials and information about the company at baconunlimited.com. You can also visit our YouTube channel, which has become quite robust at this point. There's several playlists up there and 100 and some odd videos. So please go on YouTube and search for Bacon Unlimited. You'll find us right away, and we really appreciate that. So I think what I'll do is I'll jump into the high-level stuff, Dave, and then I'll do polls, and then hand it over to you to do a demo. Does that sound good?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Fantastic. All right, so we just got 2 quick slides, and then we're going to move on to polls and everything else. So what is Bacon Unlimited? Because some of the people I know on the call have never heard of us before, never gotten to use the platform. Bacon is a security-first cross-platform endpoint management tool. What does that mean? Well, it means we work on Windows, Linux, and Mac with feature parity. We also support MDM functions on Mac and also on Apple iOS. So we do MDM for phones and tablets as well. We do not do Android yet, but we will in the future. Bacon was designed to have a very intuitive interface, to be very secure, and it was built because essentially the tools in the marketplace were largely stagnant and leaving people without the options to easily solve modern IT endpoint management problems. So patching, software deployment, remote control of systems, monitoring, inventory information, and all of this essentially in real time and securely from anywhere. So to do all of those things, it became clear that we could either do it poorly and use many, many different tools, or we could build something. So 5.5 years ago in my other company, we decided to do that, and that's where Bacon was born. It has since evolved into its own completely separate company and is kind of off to the races. So we've got lots and lots of customers and lots of features, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about those here. So I mentioned you can uninstall and install packages, you can script things, you can do what we call profiles, which is a feature that allows you to essentially control any setting on any computer. Now, those profiles are a little more sophisticated in some sense, but we do supply roughly 5,000 templates, and we also offer help and support to make those work in a way that is efficient for your business. So that's essentially one of the biggest and most valuable parts of the tool. But a lot of people really are focused more on the super easy to use stuff. So the ability to patch, as you'll see today, is very simple. Installing software, equally so. The ability to remote into machines or control the command line or move things to and from the file system. You get to do all of that all within one platform, and we think it's a nice and contiguous user experience. So that was really the goal. We are adding new features all of the time, and that's what we'll talk about a little bit later. And then lastly, I'll just tip off, Dave, you want to flip to the next slide on why you should use Bacon. So as I mentioned before, it's security first and it's cross-platform. So you can do a lot of things with it, and you can do it in a way that doesn't violate any of the security requirements that you either need or want to have. And I think really the idea is that you can optimize your IT environment. You can automate a lot of the functions on your endpoints. And the big problem and why endpoints are such an important part in this equation, right? Because there are other tools out there that do monitoring, let's say, and they monitor kind of everything on the network from the outside in. And by outside in, I mean outside of each of your firewalls, endpoints, all of your servers, I don't know, time clocks, switches, wireless access points, you name it. And those tools are great, and we consider those complementary to Bacon. The problem with those tools is while they do their job very well, they don't help you actually manage in an in-depth way the endpoints. And the endpoints, because they are dynamic operating systems, right? You can install software that you want on there. You can use them for many different things. That also opens them up to being sort of the soft security underbelly of every network. And they do require extra attention and care. And the good side of that all sounds kind of like scary, but the good side of that is that if you do a good job of managing your endpoints, you can eliminate a lot of repetitive work and you can really do a great job shoring up the security capabilities of your organization. So there's a lot to be won by doing a great job with endpoints, and that's what Bacon is all about, is essentially wherever your endpoints are, whether they're in your offices, connected by VPN from somewhere else, not connected by VPN. It could be people working at home or on the road, maybe at a conference or sitting at Starbucks, frankly, and you can securely manage all those endpoints and really have a good gauge of how healthy those systems are in your environment. So that's the key to Bacon, right? Is we want to help you solve that problem. We want to help you make big gains in doing a great job managing that soft underbelly in your network. So I think with that, Dave, maybe we'll launch a poll. And oh yeah, that's right. We also have a bunch of our customers, in case you recognize any of those. We're really across all industries, and there's just tons of companies using this today. So our first poll, if you wouldn't mind answering it, is which features are you most interested in? We know that we are focusing a lot on patching today, but I want to make sure that if you want to see remote control profiles or monitoring, that Dave at least goes over those a little bit, just so you can see the user experience. And then as soon as we get that one answered, I think we might have one more. So this will stick up here for about 1 minute or so.
Yep, looks like patching always wins.
It does. Even when we don't do a webinar based on patching, we usually get people who are like, we want to talk about patching. So we can do some light overview on profiles and endpoints. Monitoring looks to be a fairly thin level of interest, only about 10% there. But still, that's great. So it should finalize up there in a sec. Yep, looks like, came out just exactly like what we thought. And then second poll here is, what operating systems do you support? So we'll make sure that we talk about patching on all of these. We do support cross-platform parity as well. So while some operating systems may not support a particular function, where they do, like something like remote support, we support it equally across each of Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. iOS, we don't do any kind of remote support today. That's generally reserved for sort of one-off remote support that's initiated from iOS devices. So you're going to want to use a different tool for that. But for Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, you can do unattended or attended support. And it's going to work all the time. And it was one of my pet peeves before we built it into our tool, was a lot of remote support tools either didn't have Linux support, when Linux has a UI, or if they did, they didn't work particularly well. So result of that poll was actually pretty mixed there. We have 95% of people want to see Windows, Dave, so I think we'll probably queue on that. But it'd be great if you can show a little bit about Linux and Mac, and even just talk briefly about the iOS updates, which we fully support and work really well in Bacon. So I think with that, if you are ready, why don't we jump into the interface and have you show people around and then get into the patching stuff.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's move along. Thanks.
All right, just to kind of orient here, we have a couple different environments we're working with today. We have this one here. This is our main Bacon server. Then I have a demo environment to show off some of the alternative methods for patching, which we'll get into. Then we have this beta environment to give you a couple of sneak peeks at some upcoming features. So before we dive in, I do want to highlight some new features in 4.2. So I'm going to start off with this server here and go over to our endpoints table. For current users of Bacon, you're probably going to notice something a little bit different. We've moved from a standard page layout for our tables to a continuous scrolling layout, right? So this allows us to display more information in an easier to access fashion versus only having a max of 500 endpoints. Here, if you have like 2,000, you'll be able to scroll down and see all 2,000. In addition, we also have a build version here. The difference between build version versus OS version is this is purely a numerical field. So now we're able to do advanced operations like checking if a build version is greater than or equal to a certain threshold. right? Previously, we couldn't do that. We had to match it directly since the operating system version comes back, excuse me, with text as well as numbers. In addition, for one more of the endpoint table updates, we also have updated our has software filter to now also contain an option for version. So now you can make a group based on devices that both have a certain software and then that certain version as well. All right, moving on from here, we actually go over to our new health dashboard. I'll have John kind of explain to you some of the changes we've made over here.
Yeah, happy to do so. So I think one of the big things that we found was if you undersized a server, or if it happened to go haywire, which happened in two particular cases, the thing that can happen is that your queues of jobs and things can get clogged. It rarely happens. They pretty much always look like this with a nice flat line there. But in the case that it does, what was happening was people would call into support and they didn't have a way to really see without digging into the command line, which is something you shouldn't ask a customer to do. So we decided to make a graph out of that just to make sure that someone could self-verify whether or not the queue was a problem. And we even added some functions to clear the queues in case you just accidentally maybe filled it by mistake because you ran a million jobs all at once or something like that. So I don't think we're going to see people using this all that often, but we want to make sure that people can fully troubleshoot from the UI with great ease. So we always had this lower part here, which showed all of the containerized services that the system is running, and you can restart all of those or one of those at a time if you're trying to solve for a particular problem. I'll give one example of this. We had someone with some security software that scanned Nginx in a way that froze it up. Now, should that happen? No. But in the case that it did, all they did was restart Nginx, which took 30 or 40 seconds, and everything worked normally again. So those kinds of little things that may come up, hopefully never, but once in a while, you want to make sure you're prepared for those. So just expanding a little bit on the health dashboard to make it easier. And I think you'll probably, not to steal your thunder, Dave, but I'm sure you're probably going to go over the support capability too with the saving of the log. So maybe I'll just hand it back to you if you want to explain where and what that is.
Yep, you got it. So what John's referring to is we've made some changes to how the ticket generation in the product works. Again, it's not something I can really show you right here, but whenever you generate a ticket in Bacon, this will send it out to our ticketing system, and now it's also going to include some server logs. This will help the support team quickly triage if you just have an issue like software-based versus maybe just the way you're implementing something or some unknowns. This makes it a lot easier for us to respond back with some useful information versus, hey, can I have your logs and all that kind of stuff. So overall, just a smoother experience for everyone. Lastly, John, you also want to cover the watchdog. I know you've made some changes there.
Oh, yes. So one of the other big things that we've come to realize is people have become quite dependent on Bacon to do really, really important work in their environment. And one of the other pieces of software that we know is extremely important on every endpoint is antivirus. And one of the big things that the most high-end and professional antivirus products do is they use some type of watchdog service to make sure that the primary antivirus services are healthy and running in the correct way. And so having a second service that monitors it and is knowledgeable about how to fix it, how to restart it, how to collect diagnostics about it is a great way and has been a tried and true way over like the last 10 years of making sure that antivirus is effectively bulletproof. And while we found that Bacon is pretty reliable, there are some occasions where agents would go offline. Sometimes it's rare, but it can be a bug in the agent, but it's usually something to do with the system. We've seen ports get interfered with, again, some other security software interfering with it or something like that. And in that case, we want diagnostics and we want some self-healing. And so we've added a watchdog service. It takes virtually no resources. Bacon already takes on average about 2% of 4 cores total of CPU. So that's 0.2%, not 2%. So it's really, really small footprint. And adding the watchdog doesn't even make a negligible change that's readable like from a standard task manager view. So it's really comes up as zeros. It's very light. However, it adds a tremendous amount of resiliency and data retrieval about the agent if it happens to have any issues and doesn't perform normally. So that's a new ad for us. We've been using that at several preview customers that are in the multi-thousand seat counts, and we've had really, really good results. So I'm looking forward to everyone as they start to roll out 4.2 to see sort of those same results of just knowing that the system is sort of taking care of itself at a new and richer level.
Excellent, thank you.
You bet.
All right, so rounding off new features and actually transitioning into patching, we're going to take a look at some changes that were made to patching in 4.2. So on the left-hand side here in the nav bar, after I expand patching, if you have Bacon, you'll notice something a little bit different. We have 3 different options here. We have available. This is going to show you your available patches. For those that have Bacon, this is your standard patch table. Then we also have history and compliance. Let's start with history. In Bacon, we're able to capture all of the update history for all of your endpoints into a table. This way, you can easily cross-reference which devices got which patches when they were available. In the case of Windows, we have like a unique patch ID here. If I pulls back to just, let's say, Mac OS, right, we have patch IDs, the OS version, the patch name, and the endpoints, as well as when the OS gives it to us. We can see when the actual patch was available, if this patch is available to install or not, and then when this was updated and when it was installed, right? I think usually the time to install is more of a Windows field if I've seen that correctly. But this gives you a lot more insight into what patches your devices have actually installed. And you can do reporting based off of this information or filters and things like that to search for certain troublesome endpoints, or again, even if it's a Windows patch you have to remove for all devices, which device you have to remove it from. This is a very quick way to figure that out. In addition, this also does apply to MDM devices too, so they're definitely not left out. We'll still have the same kind of information here as well. Now, over on the compliance side, this one I like a lot actually, more than the other one. I think the other one's good for data, but I do like to just have quick indicators. So here we have a compliance score. This will show you how compliant your devices are and just give you a small breakdown into how many patches you have available versus installed versus uninstalled, or excuse me, not installed. So we just have simple color indicators here. Usually say anything above like 90 is likely fine. So it's a quick visual way to tell how patched your environment is and if any of your devices need a reboot. All right, so with that, let's get into patching in Bacon. Before we start, I do want to kind of give you an idea of how patching in Bacon works, which will give some context to everything that comes after this. So Bacon is able to reach out to each machine and see what patches they have available, and then it'll build a patching table like this based on information. What that means is that Bacon doesn't have to store every patch available for every endpoint on the server and then push them across the network. It's going to instruct the machine on when to pull whichever patches you've selected. So what that means is we're also able to utilize different native patching mechanisms. In the case of Windows, we can still use something like a WSUS server for low bandwidth environments, but then also allow me who works from home to patch just off of my home internet, right? You would set up the specific endpoints in that site to use the WSUS server you've put in there, and then you can just send the patch directive to all machines, and then they'll take it from the WSUS server, and I'll just grab it from Microsoft. So with that, let's take a look at just a standard patching method in Bacon. We have a couple different ways you can go through this, and we'll start back at the endpoints table. So on the endpoints table, you're able to select any combo of endpoints here. Then you can go to actions and patch. And what this will do is only show you the patches that these endpoints have available. So here I see Aaron's Mac has 2, and our dev server has 2 as well. So I expect to see 4 patches up here, right? And the nice thing is that this patching UI is going to be the same no matter which method of patching you choose. You'll always get the same kind of interface, and it's pretty simple to walk through. The very first thing you're going to see here is what patches are available, and if they do or do not require reboot. Next up, you'll see the endpoints that we have available, since these are the ones we selected. So I can pick all the patches. You see the endpoints. And then we have agent and MDM endpoint scheduling. Because I chose this Mac here, both of these are showing up. So Bacon has the ability to, on Mac OS, patch either through MDM or just through the agent, and it'll intelligently pick which one works best. And so you can kind of see here, I'm able to push out patches even cross-platform without any big change in like how I do it or what I have to take into account. So for the options we have here, on the left-hand side for agent scheduling, we're going to go with install immediately. This is going to push out to everybody who's online. Thankfully, all these devices are. If they're offline, then the patch job will just fail. If I use run when connected, this will push out to everybody who's online, and then if they're offline, it'll queue it and wait for that machine to come online, then give them the patch. Next up, I have schedule time. So this allows me to pick a time and a date, and then the patch will get pushed out at that time. Or I have relentless mode, and usually I like to turn this over to John since he has some history with the feature. Wouldn't mind taking it away.
Yeah, happy to do so. So, relentless mode is a feature that was actually thought up, I wish I could say by me, but it was by a prospective client who is now currently a client out of Los Angeles. And they were watching the demo on how we were doing patching about 3 years ago. And they said, you know, the only problem I have is that my management requires that we schedule a very specific time window to be able to do like patches and reboots on servers. And I thought to myself, I know a lot of people who have to do that, and that is something that we should definitely be able to handle and make easy. So as we started thinking about the feature, we produced it in about 2 months. And essentially what we decided to do was make it that you could schedule anytime in the future a specific start and end time, right, to run whatever patches you want against whatever machines you want. So essentially, you have a whole bunch of outstanding patches for, I don't know, let's say all your Windows laptops. You could say, I just want to do my Windows laptops. I want to do them at this time, and I don't want it to go more than 4 hours, right? And in that time comes the relentless mode, the relentless part of the feature, which is the fact that the job consists or continues on after the first reboot, which was something that we had seen some tools we'd used in the past had a problem with. So with our case, it's really working together with the machine. It's utilizing all the metadata from the updates. We gather all the metadata from Windows updates, Mac updates, and 8 types of Linux. And we've worked with the manufacturers of those operating systems to make sure that we're following their SDK requirements to a T, essentially to make sure that when we patch, that we only patch the right patch in the right machine, that they go in the right order, that they reboot correctly, et cetera, et cetera. So essentially what happens in relentless mode is you pick your time window, and let's say you've got a backlog of patches. In this case, I'll use, say, on servers, right? And so you've got, let's say, an average of 100 backlog patches on a bunch of servers. Well, when you run relentless mode, let's say you have 4 hours. Well, in 4 hours, depending on the size of the updates and how efficient on resources the machines are, basically what do they have for available resources, maybe you could get through all those. And 100 patches, that might be like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 reboots. It will patch and reboot, patch and reboot, patch and reboot until it either finishes all of those tasks or until it runs out of time. And if it does run out of time, it will cease moving on to the next task. And so that's really the key part there. You don't want to have an accidental reboot, outside of that window. And you also don't want to sit there and watch it and have to start jobs over time and time again. So that's what relentless mode was built to do. We have more features coming. We're always thinking of new ways to do patching in more clever ways let's admit it, like patching is really important, but it's not that fun. So what we want to do is we want to make it as easy a task as possible so you can work on the things that take a little bit more of your brain power or a little bit more of your customer service skills to your end users. So that's really the goal here, and relentless mode is just one of those functional elements that just doesn't really exist in some other types of patching systems. So back to you, Dave.
Thank you.
You bet.
I don't know, man. I think my favorite hobbies are just patching and watching paint dry, but if you insist. Alrighty, so moving on, that's how we do patching through the endpoints table side, but there's an additional option I want to cover before we get too far away. So if I go back to my endpoints table and I choose any endpoint, I'm also able to patch directly from this endpoint. And if I choose install, this will lead us to the page we just saw where we can set the time. Or I have the option of install now. This will push the patch out immediately to the device and completely bypass that page. So if there are any devices, maybe like a set of lab PCs that currently aren't in use, you can just select all these patches and just push the patches out. No problem, and just save you an extra step. Aside from that, we also have patching in the standard table here. What this does, it goes patches out to endpoints. So we see the patch information first. So if I look here, I can see all different information we have. This is going to be OS agnostic. So we have all the OSs in here, right? Windows, Ubuntu, keep scrolling, find some CentOS at the bottom. When we click on these, we're going to get all the information from the machine itself that it can see about the patches. So here I see the name, the unique GUID in the case of Windows, then any categories associated with it. This here is a driver from Lenovo. Then any kind of description. They're known for being very verbose in their description, so it's the best we got there. And then if it does or does not require reboot, along with a list of endpoints that need that patch. And from here, I have different options. I can hide the patch if I'd like. Let's say I don't want to install any machines. That can be useful for like print drivers we don't want to install as an accident. We're not planning on making any changes, right? Or I can go to install, and again, we're going to be led right back to that page. The only difference is here, it's only going to show you the machines that need this patch, right? So it's the other direction. So even if I select all these patches here, I'll only see devices in our network that need this patch, or at least one of these patches on the table, I should say. They have all these patches, and then we have all these devices that need at least one of those patches. After that, again, same kind of scheduling options once you choose endpoints here. Now, I'd say this method works for most people, right? You can come in here, you can choose your patches, you can kind of dictate your own patching schedule. But what if you want something more automated or you have other needs? Like before I said, we can use WSUS, right? So that solves the low bandwidth issue where you can set up WSUS, have only certain Windows endpoints configured to use it, or even like external patch repositories for Linux and Mac. That's also an option. And Bacon will send the commands to the device to patch using its native method, whatever that's been configured to do. That way you can patch machines in those environments and machines outside of those special environments without any change to what you have to do in Bacon. But for more flexibility, we kind of start to rely on our repository and our profiles. So profiles and states, to explain this really quick, profiles are a collection of states. And states are just individual configurations. These can be things like local group policy, registry keys, ways to configure services, running scripts, installing software. For the most part, I'd say our states are very flexible, and there's very little we can't do. I write these as part of our normal support process, so people are asking me to write all kinds of stuff, and so far I've been to put everything into a state of some sort. So through here, I've just selected for states that, or I'm going to select, let me say that, for states that I've uploaded. I'll go back to my demo server for this one. And so here we see things like I've set, firewalls with these, but we want to focus on these LGPOs. So in here, we're able to set local group policy on Windows, and we can do things like configure automatic updates. For those of you still dodging Windows 11, which I completely understand, there's also things for selecting the target feature update version, where you can say, hey, look, I don't want to go past Windows 10 version, 22H2. And you can set that so your devices stop prompting your user to install Windows 11. For this, though, let's focus on this configure automatic updates state. Then here, this is just an excerpt from our Git repository with different templates in it. I've modified this one a little bit. So here we can see after line 89, we're setting the automatic update GPO. If you've set this before, this is going to look very familiar to you. All the different parameters we're using here are the ones straight out of the UI. And so here, this allows us to auto download and schedule Windows updates. And for our schedule, you can see here every Saturday at noon on the 4th week of the month. So that's pretty granular, and that's just built into Windows in this case. So we can push this out, and then those devices can just update on their own. You don't have to worry about having someone online to push it out or scheduling. If you're not concerned with that and automated is the way you'd like to go, then this is a great solution for you. Now, it gets better. We can still do more customization, but this time we're going to go around what Microsoft has made for us and bring in some other features. So for that, I'll go back to my states. And I'm going to pull up this one here, this install Windows updates by patch age day. what this is going to do is very simple on the state side. It's going to copy a script that I wrote, put it in a temp folder, and then run that script. So once that script due, let's take a look in our repository. So in our repository, I'll open up my demo script. And this kind of shows the flexibility of what we can do in Bacon. Because we're able to push out basically any kind of configuration you need, it gets very flexible, even if, again, the operating system in question, Windows, doesn't have native support for what we'd like to do. In this case, we want to install updates based on categories that are only a certain patch age or greater. So in the world of Windows Update, I think a lot of us can agree that updating immediately when things come out for your entire environment can be a little bit risky. You might spend some time fixing stuff or rolling back the updates. Sometimes it's easier to wait a little bit before you install it so you can do some research to see how it would affect your environment or do some testing manually. So here we specified a patch age of 21 days. So we want to install every patch that is at least 21 days older and grab everything that's older than 21 days as well. Then we can set a patch days. In this case, I set to Thursday. And here's just some code for capturing update categories to translate the script. What we're really looking at here is we want to make sure that we're just grabbing only the patches we want to install and leaving the rest. So with this kind of script, I can push this out to my machines, let's say every hour, every 4 hours, however you'd like it to keep repeating. And it allows me to see the job logs over here. So ahead of time, I've pushed this out to one of my test machines. And so we can take a look at what we're able to do in Bacon with this kind of patching requirement. So the script executes, then it's going to search for Windows Update, of which it found 3. Say one that's 9 days old, that's a little bit too spicy for us, 23 days old, and 37 days old. Next up, it's going to install just the 2 that meet that 21-day or older requirement. Then the very last one, it'll output here saying it didn't install it. So this is something you're not going to see in any GPO in Windows is please install only these states, but take this delay to it, right? This is very flexible, but pretty soon this script will be available in our Git repository for other people to use. That's kind of the beauty of Bacon is we're able to be very flexible with, very little effort here. We're going to provide the script. You just have to plug it into your Bacon server and you're pretty much good to go. All right, so that's mainly what we wanted to show for patching, but I would like to cover some of the other things we were talking about as far as different abilities, features we have in Bacon. So on that poll, I know we wanted to take a little look at the remote, so let's take a look at that. So over in Endpoints, we have the remote built into Bacon. And so it can be deployed very simply by either selecting an endpoint and going to install remote, or we can just find an endpoint and you can also install from this menu here. Now to give a quick overview, we have a screen, a shell, and a file system remote. So the screen remote is pretty much what you would think it is. We're able to connect here and see the screen of the user. This does support multiple or multi-session operating systems. So if you've got like an RDS server, you'll have a prompt here to pick which session you'd like to log into. We also have a shell. This allows you to get a shell that runs a system. And the nice thing here is that this is a fully interactive shell as far as, keyboards are concerned. So you're actually able to start PowerShell, run different commands, set variables, stuff like that. So it's pretty flexible in what you're able to do. And then we have a file system browser as well. So with this, we're able to upload and download files from this computer very easily. This is a quick look at our endpoint remote. All right, so John, I've mostly covered what we needed to do for the patching demo. How do we get into some upcoming features in 4.5?
I think that's great. I think 4.5, there's some stuff that is easier to talk about and there's some stuff that's easier to show. I guess we'll use beta to show because I know it's on there. I think really the big thing that's most, well, you know what, I'll talk about the the more simple one. So one of the things we already have in Bacon is the ability to, connect you with regular sort of local credentials, or you can use Active Directory credentials, and it does two-factor authentication. And these are important things for sort of the identity control, since Bacon's a very powerful system, and we really want to make sure that you stay secure with the people that have access to log in. It also has full role-based access control in doing that. But one of the things that's happening with us and with many companies, right, is people are starting to use cloud-based identity. So we're also working on being able to do a single sign-on with Azure and with Okta, so that if maybe you're not using Active Directory anymore and all your machines are only through Azure AD, and that's how you like to control your identity, well, you'll be able to do the single sign-on and see the apps all on your single sign-on page and all those nice things. So that's one of the things that's coming in 4.5. It's not very visualized right now, but it's already all built on the back end. On the front end, though, is something we can show off, which is a new feature called proactive third-party patching. So one of the things you can already do today pretty easily is you could download, let's say, the Chrome installer, right? And you can put that in our repository, and you can roll that out with great ease. However, no one's going to let you know from Bacon today that your Chrome is out of date, right? So if you have Chrome, I don't know, version 103, and it's up to version 104, 5, 6, whatever it is, the problem with that is there could be associated security problems. There could be concerns with functionality. And the other thing is if with browsers is just one example of the hundreds, a couple hundred pieces of most common software out there, you just want to kind of keep things automatically up to date in some cases. And so our new feature, which is third-party proactive patching, has this little box here that Dave is showing called tracked packages. And with tracked packages, you get to do a couple of things. One thing you can do is you can track right from the Google repository the latest edition of Google Chrome. You can also do that with tons of others. So right out of the box, we'll have a couple hundred pieces of software, but you can also build custom software configurations for maybe an app we haven't thought of yet, and it's really easy. So it's not like some complicated thing you got to wait 6 months to build it or something. If there is a public repository and it's a piece of software, adding it is a real cinch. So the key here, though, is that any of these third-party pieces of software, I like using browsers as an example because they are security-wise usually a little bit of a nightmare. You could track them, and you could have no action taken on your machines, but you would know every single machine with Google Chrome whether or not it was out of date or up to date. And that's really helpful. You can get monitoring alerts based on that and so on and so forth. But you have an additional capability on top of just tracking it, which is also adding it for automatic install. Now, that doesn't mean it's across the board blanket. When you check that setting, and Dave's got the little actions button there, he can show you it's just another simple click there. You just go in there and say update old out-of-date versions. That just means that you want to choose, once you've selected this, certain groups of computers that you want to be able to use that. So that's a sort of activating the ability to, let's say, take Google Chrome and make it available, or 7-Zip or Adobe Reader. There's a lot of different common software out there. So let's just say with Google Chrome that you've done both of these checklists. So you're tracking and you are downloading the latest package automatically and setting the stage for automatic updates. Well, now you'll be able to choose groups of computers. We already have a very rich grouping system in the software. It's really sort of woven into everything that does both static and dynamic groups based on criteria. And those dynamic groups are updated in real time. So if you said, any machine that is Windows that is on this network and is currently online, I want that machine, right, to get automatically updated. Well, we can do that. And so with that, you'll be able to not have to touch it again. And Google Chrome, with every new version come out, will automatically update those specific machines. And so you can do that in this first edition. It will be Windows only, but in nearly after that, you'll be able to do that with Mac and Linux as well. So Windows was the one where people were having the most trouble with this. The patching system for Linux already includes most, if not all, third-party software, and Apple has some unique settings that we're going to build separately for that. So this very first edition in 4.5 will have a very rich Windows experience, but it will allow all Windows software that has public repositories, which is roughly 97 or 98% of all software now. Makes this possible that you can download their new versions and so forth. So you'll be able to update things automatically, but also be aware of them. There might be certain software you just want to know if it's out of date, and there might be other software that you want to know if it's out of date, you want to know that it needs to be patched, and you'll be able to do all of those things. So that's probably the most exciting stuff in 4.5. One of the other things that's not in the UI yet is yet another enhancement to regular patching, which is the ability to follow more of an approval process type methodology. So think about calendars and, again, groups of computers, and saying, maybe every Saturday night I like to automatically patch all my servers, and every Tuesday afternoon starting at 4 p.m. I like to run patches but without reboots against all of my laptops. Well, we all know we can do this with Windows Update today, except for that it's short on a bunch of features, right? So one of the things is when they're doing automatic updates, they have this thing called important updates. That's not actually a real category. It's a conglomeration of categories. It's not very specific and detailed. You'll be able to choose exact categories. You'll be able to choose ages. This is another really big one. If I approve all patches that are at least 21 days old and are in the critical or security patch group, I'm going to have a much better experience doing a quasi update or automatic update than regular automatic updates is. Because for anybody who's suffered through a Patch Tuesday snafu where Windows sent out something that blew up a bunch of computers, it's a pretty unpleasant experience. So while our recommended strategy today, and will continue, is to always test your patches on some test machines before you decide to do rollout, we do also usually recommend that unless something is a critical today kind of security update, to roll out those patches, at least a couple of weeks after they come out on Patch Tuesday. It's common that their patches receive new version updates in the first few days they're out. So we're going to want to automate that even more. And so you'll have the ability to set different schedules for different groups of machines and go through a slightly different workflow where you can choose all the patches from all the patches that are available, and you'll be able to approve the ones that you want to get patched. And as you can imagine, when your schedule comes around for each machine, or each group of machines, if it happens to have patches that it needs that have been approved, they will get installed at that time using very similar functionality to what you saw with Relentless Mode. So that's kind of the idea. And again, we're just always trying to come up with new and better ways to fully enhance patching so it's not a hassle for you. Always interested to hear people's questions and feedback on that, as well as to glean more intel on problems and interesting stories that people have. So I think that's kind of 4.5 in a nutshell, Dave. Anything I missed?
Nope, got everything on my list.
Well, all right. I think somebody asked on here, and it doesn't look like it got answered yet. Does Bacon use its own system utility to patch or rely on the built-in OS update utility? It's a mixture. So one of the things you learn when you're building update tools is do not break the fundamental architecture of the OS. They have some very, very good capabilities there. The problem is that they're generally limited, right? They're more like a framework. So they offer a lot of consulting, actually. You'd be surprised to find out, but if you're a developer, you can get a lot of information from Microsoft and from Apple and from Red Hat about the system itself and how to talk to the APIs that are built right into the operating system. In the case of Windows, there are what are called COM APIs, and they can be a little challenging to work with, but they provide incredible amounts of control and information. And so the big key that we wanted to make sure we focused on was obeying the rules in the system, because we've seen a lot of patching systems basically fail for months at a time because they broke something that Microsoft specifically told them, don't write your own DLL for this, don't do it this way, and they did, right? So Dave is very familiar with that because he used to work for a company that had just that problem, and we really wanted to avoid it. So the big thing here is, yes, we partially use some of their functional underpinnings, but we have our own agent and we do our own control set, and we can actually work around limitations on the agent. So we can do a lot more than what the system can do by itself and give you a lot more visibility and control at the levels that you care about. And when you get into our profile system, you can get extremely detailed, like basically as detailed as is capable in the code itself. Most people don't really need to get into that sort of thing, but rest assured we have templates, and we have people said, oh, I just want to do the patch age. I just don't want any patches that are newer than, say, like 3 weeks, 21 days. We already made that. So we were able to get them up and working on that in their system in like 20 minutes. And they were like, well, how often do I have to change this? And pretty much never, if that's always the amount of days you want. And if you want to change the amount of days, that'd take 30 seconds or a minute or something like that. So a lot of control there, a lot of really interesting things that you can accomplish with this system. I think that's probably the only open question I saw there. Anything else you think we should be mentioning here, Dave?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay. Well, I definitely would recommend everybody here who really is finding interest in this to do a one-on-one demo with us. We're very happy to do them. We'd love to hear about what you're doing in your business and what your challenges are and how Bacon could come. We love to be challenged. So come and do a demo with us. Tell us exactly what problem you're trying to solve, and we can do some really good things with that. I did notice that somebody mentioned that could we use laps to authenticate to install patches? We run at the system level, so we don't require utilizing laps to run the password or something like that, although that is actually something that would be within our realm of capability. We also do some things that replace laps, and we can do all kinds of escrowing of encryption keys and passwords and changing and setting passwords and things like that. So that's something probably would be good for a one-on-one demo, but I just noticed that that question had popped up here kind of while we were wrapping. Looks like there's a few more questions in here, and we've got people asking about pricing. We've got people asking, did the stream, oh, I think someone lost the stream. It didn't stop for me. I don't know if anyone else had that problem. It might be on that one person's particular end, but if you did lose the stream, we will be releasing the recording on our YouTube page, and also, again, happy to cover anything that got frozen for you there. So I think with that, we're probably at the end of time. We really appreciate you filling out the survey here in a moment. We'll give you some minutes to do that, and look forward to meeting all of you, and thank you so much for spending time with us today. And thank you, Dave, for all the help.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right.